September. Today I'm going to show you how to make holographic artwork for your fight stick trading card game style. What I mean by that is that, as you can see on this fight stick artwork, it's mostly all holographic, except for the Vashta Stampede. He's still solid. There's a trick to that I'm going to show you today.
First, the supplies you need and some that are useful. Scissors. You want one about as big as this one. It's easier to cut long straight lines rather than in little pieces at a time. Transparency sheet. For this I'm using an 11 by 17 transparency sheets for a inkjet printer. Foil cardstock. I found a good assortment of cardstock foil paper. I'll post them in the description and hopefully they're still selling them, but you can always find some yourself on Amazon or other places. Cardstock paper. You're going to need some cardstock paper or heavier paper that you can cut with a craft knife without it ripping on you. Spray adhesive. They make repositional spray adhesive that doesn't stick as permanently, allowing you to move it around but it can still stick. Craft scissors. These are little scissors to get those fine details or to help trim some places you didn't cut quite right. Craft knife. The most common type is an X-Acto knife, but any craft knife will work. Paper trimmer. This is optional, but it helps to get clean lines edges, but it's hard to get accurate. Inkjet printer. I like inkjet over laser because inkjet prints are more transparent. With a laserjet, ink like black will really block the foil. A cutting board. Cutting board could be wood, glass, or self-healing mat. So this works on controllers that fits within 11 by 17 because that's how big the transparency sheets are. And also you have to have a cardstock big enough for your controller as well. My Hot 42 R16 barely fit on my cardstock because the cardstock was slightly bigger than 8.5 by 11. They make foil sticker sheets in bigger sizes, but you can't really cut through one with a craft knife without it folding and moving on you. I've tried sticking the foil sticker to a piece of paper, but you run the risk of making creases and bubbles. They also have laserjet and inkjet vinyl adhesive sheets, saving you the trouble of using spray adhesive, but you will still need to add the cardstock layer to make parts of the artwork solid. So with a computer, some editing software, and a printer, get an image or use a PSD file that you made and put it on your fight stick template of choice. You can get a template from Focus Attack or from the manufacturer. Print it to the transparency sheet and set to actual size or an equivalent since your printer might be different. Once you got your transparency sheet printed, you need to make the parts you want to remain unfoiled. So using editing software, load up your PSD file that you just printed with the layout and you need to do some photo editing. I'll show an example of how I made mine. I have the render layer of the Shy Guy and a layer of the buttons, but you can also select other parts of your image, but just add it as a part of the shape layer you're going to create. I have these layers already separated from each other, making it easy to make selections with them. If you just have an image you got somewhere, you're gonna have to cut them out and make this shape yourself with the pen tool. Check out the tutorial about using the pen tool in the description. You want to select the render as a whole selection and fill it with a color on a separate layer to create a shape. I did this in Photoshop by having the render as a separate layer and hitting Ctrl left click to select the entire shape. For the sake of this video, I'm going to show how I would include the triangle shapes in the background to the shape layer. The triangle shapes I'm going to include into the cutout are on a separate layer. In my case, all I need to do is Ctrl left click on the preview in the layer window and it will select the triangle shapes I want to include. Then make a new layer on top of the rendered shape layer and fill it with white, then merge them. You can do this by positioning them together and hitting Ctrl E on the most top one, or going to layer on the top left and clicking on merge layers. Use the magic wand tool and go to the layout layer, or the layer that has the buttons on it. Select the outside portion of the buttons. Once you made the selection, you're going to delete it from the shape layer or make a layer mask to be non-destructive. Now for this part, you're going to make a stroke outside of the shape and make the inside transparent. You want to make this outline faint, so if you cut incorrectly, it won't show up through the transparency sheet that much, unlike my Furin one. You can do this by selecting the shape layer and clicking on the effects button at the bottom of the layer window. In effects, you want to select stroke. Then, under the percent in the layer window, set that to 0%. So this next part, you need to print the outline on some cardstock paper and cut out the shape of a craft knife. On the Hot 42, you have your small buttons on the top right and screw holes on the corners. Instead of cutting a small circle, I cut a square or rectangle around it. Also, I wanted to point out on my freer one, you can see the mistakes I made on the first try. Like some of the black outline poking through the transparency sheet and it being misaligned, so it's going to take some practice. I recommend that you watch the video I'm going to link in the description on how to cut out the shape with a craft knife. I will say keep in mind where the buttons are going to go on top of your render because working around buttons is difficult, also have a less complex design. In my example it was really tough to cut the hair, so you might want to avoid fine details like that. Once you have the non-foil part cut out and the transparency sheet printed, you should apply some spray adhesive to your transparency sheet. Make sure that the front side is facing down. Also, you're going to want to use something behind it that you can throw away because once you use the spray adhesive and you try to use the same spot again with another piece of artwork, the back will get sticky and will stick to your controller. I used a tote lid with a plastic bag over it that I can reuse on the other side or throw away. It is recommended that you use repositionable adhesive because it took me a couple of tries to get the cut to align with the art on the transparency. Once they are bonded, you spray another coat on top of the transparency sheet and the cardstock paper. Then apply it to the foil cardstock. Once bonded, you have to cut again, but this time using the guidelines from the controller layout on the transparency sheet. I've shown this already earlier in the video, but this is just a closer look at the final product. Didn't do the Shy Guy one because it was only for demonstration. Well, that's all of it. I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try what I can to answer them. Thanks for watching, and catch you later, YouTube.